tape that he made this morning about free speech. It was extraordinary. I mean,
I played it to everyone.
Oh, you did?
Right before,
Okay.
yeah, just right before he came out.
And, you know, that is so important now because we're in the middle of this globalist project that started 40 years ago to diminish the power of local governments, the sovereign power of local governments all over the Western democracies, to diminish individual power so that we don't have sovereignty over our own lives, and to centralize control in these, big international agencies like the World Economic Forum and the United Nations and UNICEF and all this. And Trump, when he came in, liberals like myself criticized him for leaving UNICEF or defunding the World Health Organization, and I fell into that, that sort of dogma. And now I can see in retrospect that actually he was right as he could be on those issues because, after we lived through COVID, millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world understand what's happening, that this is a organized, systematic, devious, nefarious project by these elites to turn the world into a technocracy and to put all of our faith in the technocrats. That's why this mantra of trust the experts. Trusting the experts is not a feature of democracy. It is not a feature of science. It is. It's a feature of religion. It's a feature of totalitarianism. But it's absolutely anathema to science and democracy, and that is the mantra we've now all been trained in. And Trump, never saw that, and he doesn't articulate these what's happening. He's not a guy who sits and explains it to the American people like I do. He has a different approach, which is he has a genius for touching these kind of the reptilian core of the human brain by connecting to us on ways that are really visceral and atavistic, and saying things that terribly upset huge amounts of the population. So people then pigeonhole him as this or strange, impulsive, out of control, narcissistic, bombastic character. But actually, there's a method to his madness, and part of that method is he is a consummate entertainer. So people, he gets attention every time he says these things, and he stays on the front page of the paper. And he's worried about his crowd size. He's worried about his ratings in the press, and he's looking at that all the time. And those are the metrics by which he measures himself. And we look at that and we say, oh, that's very superficial. He's a superficial person. Those are the things he cares about. But his ability to tap into that part of us has given him the power that allows him to stand up to this globalist project. And that's what we saw this morning when you saw this. The stuff that he was saying was, that should put him on Mount Rushmore alone, that speech. As he came out and he told us what is happening. And let me just say one other thing and answer that question. I've been incredibly, I believe now that he is really a great man, that he is, that he has this aura of greatness around him, I saw him do something this week. I was on the airplane with him. We started talking about the Mideast, and he drew a map of the Mideast, which no American could do this. I mean, very few people could do it. And then he wrote down in each country the troop strength. And he was talking about Syria, and why do we have 500 troops in northern Syria? Right? Why is that? And he said, he asked his generals, he said, okay, here Turkey has 750,000 troops. He wrote that Syria has 250,000. The clash between those two, we have 500 troops sitting between them. And they're being bombarded and they're being killed. And he said, I asked the general, I said, what happens to those guys if Syria and Turkey actually clash? And he said, the general told me, they're cannon fodder. They all die. And Trump said, he said to them, get them out of there. And that's exactly what when my uncle was president, he had 13 members during the Cuban Missile Crisis of his ExComm committee, which was the committee. My father was on it, Bob McNamara was on it, and they stayed. My father disappeared from our home and slept in a cot in the White House for 13 days. And it was the most perilous days in human history. You know, there were a couple of days where many people in the White House believed that we could wake up dead the next day, that 30 million Americans would die in the first half hour of a nuclear confrontation with the Russians. And we were this close to that happening. My uncle said to his intelligence apparatus and his military advisors, Louis Lemonster, Lucius Clay, and Curtis LeMay, were saying to him, you got to go in and you got to knock out these missile emplacements. There were 64 missile emplacements in Cuba that they had put up secretly overnight. My uncle said to him, how many people man each one of those? And the general said about 500 on each missile site. My uncle said to him, are they Russians or are they Cubans? And they said, they're probably Russians. My uncle said, if I kill all those Russians, isn't Khrushchev going to have to come into Berlin, which would be the beginning of a nuclear war? And they said, we don't believe he has the guts to do that. So that was their whole strategy. They didn't believe he had the guts, and they didn't know anything about Khrushchev. And my uncle said, I don't want to take that risk. And the last day of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when they made the offer through Dobrynin to Khrushchev, he took a vote in the ExComm committee. The first day, he took a vote, and 11 people of the 13 said we should bomb. My uncle and Bob McNamara are the only ones who were held out. The last day, he took a vote, and the vote was 8-6 for going in. And my uncle said the sixes have it. So what he was saying is, the only vote that counts is my vote. And I'm going to overrule all of you. And, I saw Trump's story was almost identical to that. His generals all wanted to keep those troops there in Syria. But he was saying, I'm not a military expert. I've never been in the military, but that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm going to make up my own mind. I've seen that now again and again with Trump during the transition, where we make all these suggestions about who should be in each post. He comes into the meeting, and he very quickly, there's 8 giant screens, and each person has a picture of themselves on the screen. They have a biography next to them. You can press a button, and you can see 3 different clips from that person. So you can see how he talks and how he presents himself, he or she. And he goes through them very, very quickly, and then he says, I want that guy, and he's making the decisions. He listens to what people say, but he makes the decisions, and he has very, very firm ideas, and he decides very quickly, and the meetings are very quick when he comes in. And it really, it does. Elon Musk is in the room. Amaryllis, my daughter-in-law, is in the room. And a few other people, and they all have very strong ideas. These are all alpha people, and they have very strong ideas about what should happen. But he makes those decisions. He makes them very quickly. I've seen a level of decisiveness, a real vision, and the interesting thing about him is he doesn't care what that person believes. The person, there's a very big sympathy among all of his advisors that we should stay away from the neocons. if he puts an econ up there, you shouldn't worry about it because the decision ultimately is going to come from him. And he said to me at one point, he said, you know, he really hates John Bolton. John Bolton was his NSA advisor, and he said, but it was good that I had him there because it scared the shit out of everybody in the world. That, you know, if I had John Bolton there, John Bolton wants to bomb every country in the world. And he said, they believed that I was going to do it too, so it was good for me to have him there. And so that's the way he thinks about things. He doesn't care what you believe. He doesn't care what your ideology is. He's going to make the decision himself. And I've been so impressed with that. It's completely changed my opinion of who he is and really convinced me that this guy that I had such contempt for, such disdain for, is actually, you know, a really extraordinary leader, that he could be one of the great presidents in history.
Wow. Okay, thank you for that. So, how has this campaign impacted the relationship with your family, with your wife?